The ice axe entered the back of his skull while he was reading. That detail, the specific, almost unbearable mundanity of it, is what makes the assassination of Leon Trotsky different from every other political murder of the 20th century. He was sitting at his desk. There were papers in front of him. He had been working on an article about Joseph Stalin, a biographical study, an attempt to anatomize the man who had spent 12 years methodically dismantling everything Trotsky had built and everyone Trotsky had loved. The man standing behind him was someone he trusted. Ramon Mercader had been inside the compound for months. He had courted a young woman in Trotsky's inner circle. He had brought gifts. He had been patient with a patience that was not natural but trained by Soviet intelligence over years of preparation for exactly this moment, in exactly this house, in the Coyoacán district of Mexico City. On the afternoon of August 20th, 1940, Mercader asked Trotsky to read an article he had written. Trotsky bent over the pages. Mercader removed the ice axe he had concealed under his raincoat. He swung it once. He later said he had aimed for a fatal blow, something instantaneous, something clean, something that would be over before Trotsky understood what was happening. He miscalculated the angle. What followed was not instantaneous. What followed was a scream that brought the entire household running, a struggle in which Trotsky, 60 years old, wounded with an ice axe embedded in his skull, fought back with enough force to bite through Mercader's hand. A night of emergency surgery that briefly raised the possibility of survival, and then, 26 hours later, death. Leon Trotsky, the man who had co-led the Russian Revolution, who had built the Red Army from nothing, who had been second only to Lenin in the hierarchy of the Soviet state, who had been exiled, stripped of citizenship, hunted across 3 continents, died in a hospital in Mexico City on August 21, 1940. Stalin had been trying to kill him for 12 years. It took an ice axe and 26 hours to finally finish the job.
To understand what brought an NKVD assassin to a desk in Coyoacán, you need to understand what Leon Trotsky represented, not just politically, but personally, to the man in the Kremlin who had ordered his death. In the hierarchy of the early Soviet state, Trotsky had been indispensable. He had co-organized the October Revolution of 1917, handling the operational details with the precision of a man who understood that revolutions are won not by ideology alone, but by logistics. When the new state found itself fighting a civil war against the White Army, it was Trotsky who built the Red Army from nothing, traveling the front lines in an armored train, directing battles, executing deserters, inspiring soldiers with speeches that combined revolutionary fervor with military command. By the early 1920s, serious Bolshevik voices were suggesting that Trotsky, not Stalin, should succeed Lenin. Lenin's own final testament recommended removing Stalin as general secretary and called Trotsky the most capable man in the Central Committee. Stalin ensured the testament was never read to the full party Congress. By 1924, Lenin was dead. By 1927, Trotsky had been expelled from the party. By 1929, he was on a train to Turkey, stripped of citizenship, declared an enemy of the people. Turkey, France, Norway, each country eventually pressured by Moscow to expel him. By 1936, Mexico was one of the few places willing to take him. From his house in Coyoacán, he kept writing a biography of Stalin, articles, correspondence with supporters worldwide. And Stalin, in Moscow, read everything. Trotsky continued to write with the authority of someone who had actually made the revolution, a claim Stalin could never erase, only suppress. The NKVD had been trying to kill him since at least 1936. In May 1940, a Stalinist hit team fired over 300 rounds into his bedroom and planted a bomb under his grandson's bed. Trotsky and Natalia survived by lying on the floor. 3 months later, Ramon Mercader walked into the study.
The preparation for what happened on August 20th had taken years. Ramon Mercader was the son of Caridad Mercader, a Spanish communist who had become a committed NKVD operative. He had been recruited into Soviet intelligence in the mid-1930s, trained in surveillance, infiltration, and the specific arts of gaining trust over extended periods. His handler was Pavel Sudopatov, one of the most experienced NKVD foreign operations officers of the era. The operation's design was straightforward in concept and extraordinarily patient in execution. Mercader, using a false identity, first as a Belgian named Jacques Mornard, later as a Canadian named Frank Jackson, was inserted into the social circle surrounding Trotsky's household through a young American Trotskyist named Sylvia Agaloff, whom he met in Paris and cultivated carefully over months.
By early 1940, Mercader was a regular visitor to the Coyoacan compound. He was known to the guards. He was known to Trotsky's secretaries. He had been inside the study before. He had sat across from Trotsky and discussed politics. What no one knew was what he was carrying on those visits, what he was assessing, measuring, memorizing, the layout of the rooms, the timing of the guard rotations, the habits of the household, where Trotsky sat when he worked, which direction he faced. On August 20th, Mercader arrived at the compound in the mid-afternoon carrying a folded raincoat over his arm. Beneath the raincoat, a short-handled alpine ice axe, a dagger, and a pistol. He had decided against the pistol and the dagger as primary weapons, too loud, too uncertain. The ice axe was silent. One blow to the right location, he had calculated, would end it immediately. The guards admitted him without searching him. He was a known visitor. He had been admitted dozens of times. He was taken to the study. Trotsky was at his desk. Mercader produced the article he claimed to have written and asked Trotsky to read it. Trotsky, according to Mercader's own later account, seemed slightly irritated. He had work of his own to do, but he took the pages and began to read. Mercader moved behind him. He removed the ice axe from beneath the raincoat. He later said that at that moment he felt nothing, that the training had produced in him a state that was not calm exactly, but empty, a suspension of ordinary cognition that allowed him to move through the action without the interference of feeling. He raised the ice axe. He brought it down. He had aimed for the center of the skull. He struck slightly to the right, with less force than he had intended. The accounts suggest a flinch at the final moment, an involuntary contraction of the muscles that altered the angle and the depth of the blow. The ice axe penetrated approximately 7 centimeters into Trotsky's skull. Trotsky screamed. It was a sound, according to witnesses who heard it from outside the study, that was unlike any sound they had heard a human being make. Not a cry of pain exactly, but something more total, more animal. A sound that brought every person in the compound running. Mercader had expected silence. Instead, Trotsky rose from his chair. He turned. He faced the man who had just driven an ice axe into his head. He looked at Mercader, and then, according to Mercader's own account, Trotsky spoke. He said, "You have done it." Then he threw himself at Mercader. He bit through the hand that was still holding the axe. He fought. A 60-year-old man with an ice axe embedded in his skull, bleeding massively, fighting the man who had just tried to kill him, until his guards arrived and pulled Mercader away. Trotsky collapsed. He was still conscious. He was taken from the study and laid on the floor while someone called an ambulance. Natalia came. She held his hand. He was, by the accounts of everyone present, completely aware of what had happened and what it meant. He told the guards not to kill Mercader. He said he wanted him to talk. He said it was important to understand who had sent him. He already knew who had sent him.
The ambulance took 40 minutes to arrive. During those 40 minutes, Trotsky remained conscious in his study, on the floor, with the wound in his skull and Natalia beside him. Those present described him as speaking intermittently, sometimes to Natalia, sometimes to the guards, sometimes appearing to address no one in particular. He asked about Mercader. He was told the man had been restrained. He said again that he should not be killed. He said, and this was recorded by a secretary present, that he was certain this was Stalin's work, not as accusation, but as simple statement of fact, the way a man might note the weather. He was taken to the Cruz Verde Hospital in Mexico City. The neurosurgeons who examined him found a wound that penetrated the brain to a depth that made survival improbable, but not impossible. The onyx plow had missed certain structures by fractions of centimeters. An operation was performed that evening, lasting several hours. For a period in the immediate aftermath of the surgery, there was genuine medical uncertainty about whether he might survive. His vital signs were poor, but not terminal. He remained intermittently conscious. Natalia did not leave the hospital. Outside, in the waiting area and on the street, members of the Fourth International and Trotsky's small circle of supporters gathered. The news had spread quickly, first through the Trotskyist networks, then to the wider press. By that evening, the assassination attempt was on the front pages of newspapers in New York, London, and Paris. In Moscow, Stalin was informed of the outcome. Mercader had not achieved an immediate kill. Trotsky was in surgery and might survive. Stalin waited. Through the night of August 20th and into the morning of August 21st, Trotsky's condition fluctuated. He regained consciousness at intervals. In one of those intervals, according to Natalia's account written years later, he spoke to her about his work,
about the biography of Stalin, about what remained to be written, about whether it would be finished. He did not speak about dying. He did not make final pronouncements. He was, Natalia wrote, the same person he had always been, working, thinking, reluctant to leave something unfinished. At some point in the morning of August 21st, the intervals of consciousness became shorter. At 7:25 p.m. on August 21st, 1940, Leon Trotsky died. He was 60 years old. He had survived the Russian Revolution, the Civil War, 3 deportations, 2 assassination attempts in the previous 3 months, and 26 hours with an ice axe wound in his skull. In Mexico City, the police were interrogating Ramon Mercader. He refused to reveal his real name. He maintained the cover identity of Frank Jackson for years. The true identity of Trotsky's killer was not officially confirmed until 1953, when Soviet intelligence records began to surface. In Moscow, Stalin said nothing publicly. He did not need to.